In a wild baseball season where the LA Dodgers came back and spent more money, they're in third place in the West. That's odd. And the Houston Astros, well, you know what they do. They start slow. And everybody in Astros Nation wants every coach fired. Let's let the Crawford dog guy coach the team. You know, I don't know. Maybe Mike Stanton's got some better suggestions. Let's talk right now.
I'm looking to the bullpen to bring my lefty in. Keep the lead and make your team look pedestrian. It's in your wheelhouse, we'll swing for the fence. You know it's money around here, man, I ain't talking expense. Strike one, heat low in the way, you can't hit it. You know you want to start a rally, but you better forget it. Strike two, off speed, same spot, your car looking. Get ready at the plate, this time you're not cooking. Strike three, swinging out of the zone. You ain't even touch it first. Tell me how they gonna drive you home. Walking back, looking like we ain't cool then. The game's over, might as well put them back to the bullpen, oh yeah.
That's right, and we are back to the bullpen. I'm H-Town Wheelhouse with Back to the Bullpen. You can find the show on Instagram, here on YouTube, on X, and on Spotify. You know, to find me, H-Town Wheelhouse, pretty much anywhere you get your podcasts or social media. And look, man, we've got a few things to talk about. Spencer Arrighetti, you know, his broken hand. I want to ask you if you ever heard anything that happened when you were playing. Who's hot, who's not in the league? And the Astros classic slow start. Before we get started, Mike, tell everybody where they can find you, sir.
Yeah, there's only one place, and that's on X. It's Mike Stanton 29. This Astros team. Listen, we had an idea that this team may get off to a little bit of a rocky start. We were hoping that wasn't the case, but hey, listen. They've had a couple tough losses, especially up there in Seattle. Game 1 and Game 3 were tough losses. But, you know, they're still in a better place than they were, 12 months ago.
Yeah, that's true. That is very, very true. But, you know, you in a season like they're having starting out, because if you look back on the other seasons where they are, they're not really that far off record-wise with where they've been the last several years. But producing runs-wise, that's where the discrepancy comes. I mean, there's only 2 teams that have scored fewer runs than the Astros this year. And that's, I believe, actually 3, the Braves, the Reds, and the White Sox. The Astros have scored 38 runs, and they've not scored that few runs since I think 2021 or 2022. I think they only scored like 22, or they only scored like 40 runs. So, you know, the run production has not been there. And I think some of that can be attributed to with the loss of Tucker and Bregman, where Bregman's your classic patient guy to play. And I know he's a slow starter. You still had more strikeouts come into the clubhouse with Walker and Paredes in exchange for more home runs that are supposed to be leaving the ballpark with Walker and Paredes. That's not happening. You've got Yainer Diaz, who's just, man, he's scuffling at the plate right now. But is it different this year in 2025 than others? I mean, this seems to be a weaker team offensively, or are we have recency bias when it comes to judging this Astros team?
Well, I do think we're spoiled, you know, with the run that this team has been on over the last, almost a decade now. I think that we look at it and we expect more. And when we don't get it, it doesn't feel good. But I also think this is a different team. I mean, you're talking about a team, I thought going into this team, really not knowing exactly what to expect. And you knew that there was going to be more pressure on Jose Altuve. And Jose is actually the only one that's really doing well offensively. You know, and a lot of pressure on Yordan. You needed Yordan to be a beast, and he just hasn't been that so far this year. You know, Christian Walker has struggled. Cam Smith, you know, the phenom in right field, he has not done a whole heck of a lot, even though he did have an RBI. I think an RBI triple in yesterday's game. Right. So it's just one of those things. The sample size is still small. You know, what are you looking to do at this time of year? Well, you're looking to, not do what happened last year, which was get yourself behind the 8 ball and need a big time trick shot in order to get out from behind the 8 ball. And they did that last year. But this year, you know, even though the numbers haven't been pretty, you know, they're still, hovering around 500, a little bit below, but that's okay. It's just one of those things. But this was a different lineup. You're not talking about a powerhouse lineup. You're talking about, some really good players at the top of the lineup. The second half is suspect. And I think, even though you've had some guys like Jake Myers has had a couple big hits, Paredes has had a couple big hits, but, you don't know really what to expect in the second half of that lineup.
Yeah, that's true. And, Cam Smith had a little bit better of a road trip. The last few games that he's played in, he's actually hit, pretty decently, Mike. And so that's a good thing. You mentioned Jake Myers. Jake Myers has hit decently. His Cam Smith is 3 for his last 7 at bats.
Okay.
That's a small sample size, but it's better than saying something else.
Better than not.
Better than not. Then you look at what Jake Myers is doing right now, and Jake Myers on the young season is 276. 364 on base percentage and 709 OPS. In 29 at bats, he has 8 hits. So when in the lineup, he's getting on base, he's producing. But
listen, if they win yesterday's game, you feel a lot better about where they are. I know it's just one game, but they would have won another series. Abreu just didn't have it. I mean, you know what? It wasn't just Abreu though. It was really the whole bullpen. They threw 90 pitches, 89 pitches. I'm going to give them one extra. They threw 90 pitches in the last 3 innings of the game. Wow. They had a 5-0 lead with 4 outs left in the game and lost the game. And so that, Abreu, he wasn't throwing strikes. It looked like he was pitching away from contact. It was just one of those things. And Josh Hader, the reason he wasn't in there was because he had gone 2 innings the game before to finish off that game 2 in Seattle. So, it was just that, and that's a devastating loss. Yes, I know it's April. It's early April, or I guess we're mid-April now. We're not even to tax day yet. And we're looking at this and we're saying how devastating a loss it is. And it is a devastating loss, not because because in the standings, it's just a game. Okay. But It's how they did it, that you had the 5-0 lead, that you couldn't hold it, that you had a 2-run lead in the 9th inning and couldn't hold it. And it was one of your big leverage relievers, even though if it wasn't your closer in Brian Abreu that ended up giving it up. And I've always said, when you are winning for 8 innings and then you lose in the 9th, even for a veteran club, it's devastating. You're expecting yourself to win those baseball games, especially when you have one of your dudes in the bullpen on the mound. And it didn't happen. It wasn't like Brian was trying not to, that wasn't trying. He was probably trying too hard, but he just couldn't put the ball in the zone when he needed to. And you gotta hate the ever popular walk-off walk.
Oh, that's like the worst. I would rather get drummed 10-0. Just especially, Contreras gets these guys on. You put Stephen O'Kurt in a really bad position. Yep. Stephen O'Kurt, who's been nails since spring, who's been great in the regular season, and then to give up what he gave up, just to see that grand slam go over the fence, and then you get.
But you still had the lead. I mean, that's
you still had the lead. You got an extra run. You're up 6-4.
The top of the 9th, you get the extra run. I was like, man, that's a big run to give Abreu a 2-run lead, and then he goes out there and struggled the way he did.
And I want you to speak to this just from a manager's perspective. Joe Espada is, I think, your ultimate team guy. I mean, I'm not looking for a manager to throw their players under the bus, nor should he.
Right.
But when
I know where you're going,
but when you tell me or tell the media that Luis Contreras has been great for us and he hasn't, it's like, okay, can we at least say, look, we know what Luis Contreras has. We know his upside. He's just not hitting the spots that we know he can hit, but we feel like he's right. He's about to turn the corner. I'll take that. But Don't tell me he's been great. I don't know, Mike.
That didn't. And I don't think that, if you gave Joe a mulligan and said, "Hey, do you want to go back and change that statement?" he would probably say yes. I mean, just simply because, it's one thing to take up for your players. It's another thing, to just not tell the truth. I mean, he hasn't been great. Now, you expect him to be great? Okay. He had a good spring training. Okay. That's all fine and good. But since the regular season started, that hasn't been the case. And all that is Joe just trying to take up for his players and keep confidence in them. And he did, he did it last year too. If you remember, his head was on the chopping block, according to fans, with the way they started last year. And there was even talk about how he had lost the clubhouse and this, that, and the other. And you're like,
rumors about that.
We're 2 weeks into the season, and you're ready to boot this guy in his first managerial job. But I understand the optics in that statement. They weren't really there, but you kind of understand what he was trying to do, which was he's just trying to take up for his players and wants the players to know that he's got their back.
The one thing I do like about this club is we do have a really solid pitching staff. The pitchers have done, really for the most part, really, really well.
Pitching has not been the issue.
No, it's funny. Rio says we only have a negative 10 run differential. I would love to have a positive run differential, but that negative 10 would be higher if our pitching was worse. That would. Listen, the pitching has not been the issue. Yes, okay. Abreu blew the game yesterday. That happens. Nobody's perfect. Hopefully there's nothing wrong. It was just a bad day because, even the best of relievers have bad days. But, really the Mike Stantons of the world,
Oh, notorious. I was notorious for about 2 or 3 times a year giving up a 4 spot in like a third of an inning. So, we'll keep our fingers crossed there that there's nothing going on with Abreu.
Right.
I don't think there is. But, the issue has been the offense. And this isn't a new situation. This hasn't been a great offense in a long time.
Right.
Even in years in the past where they've put up, big numbers, they're leading the league in this and they're leading the league in that. A lot of it is how you get to those numbers. It's not just, what the team batting average is or how many runs per game you score on average. It's how many runs a game you score per day. You score, 3 runs in 2 games, and then the next game you score 7 or 8, and all of a sudden the average is fine. But you have to go back and look at the day to day and say, okay, yeah, they have big games, they have big innings, but where is the consistent runs scored? And what this does is this just puts that much more pressure on the pitching staff.
Yeah, it does. And at some point, your bullpen is just like everybody else. They're not going to be perfect. But
especially when you had to rebuild it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, but man, when you look at that box score, you're like, what are you doing losing this game? So all I'm going to say is at times the bullpen's not going to come through. Most of the time you don't have a really solid offensive game, a really good start, and then a collapse like this. That's more the exception than the rule.
Sure.
And there's a lot of people, I told y'all we were going to be a 500 club. And I'm like, come on, what are we doing here? But yeah, seriously, at this rate, there would be people the guys who drive the little bicycle taxis, they would be coaching this team if we had enough fans in charge of who was being hired and who was being fired, because they want everybody gone. And
were those called like the rickshaws?
Yeah. There you go. Well, I think though, Mike, I do want to know though, let's just say we go the entire season and things just seem more off than normal. Could bringing in someone that has a different philosophy really change it that much? Or is it still ultimately up to the players?
It's always up to the players. Now,
right.
What is the voice what is the message that the voices in the coaching staff are, what are they saying? Yeah, that's going to come into play, but ultimately it's up to the players to get their job done. And you got to remember, this is a different day and age in baseball. This isn't the Jim Leland, I don't need a leader in the clubhouse, I'm the leader in the clubhouse type situation. These really across the board, even when you have a manager that is a big name, these are true, team oriented messages that come from all parts of it, whether it's the analytics department, whether it's the sports psychology department, the medical department, whatever. They're all using the same lingo and the same message. So it's not just the manager and the coaches. That is just a microcosm of what's happening all the way through the whole organization.
Yeah, true. And it's funny, people at the beginning of the season are always like, why are we why is this guy hitting here? Why is this guy hitting there? And then the second the manager changes the lineup, why do you change the lineup? Why is that guy hitting there? Why is that guy hitting there?
That's why if you're a manager, you can't pay attention. You can't pay attention to what the media says because, or especially fan base, because what is fan short for? Fanatic. So that means that there might be a screw or two loose up there when it comes to talking about, the logistics of what the baseball, what happens day to day. And, listen, nobody has a set lineup now anymore, period. We used to laugh about it when AJ Hinch was at the helm, that it seemingly had a different lineup every single day. Well, that's kind of the norm.
It is kind of the norm. And look, so I think our pitching will continue to be settled in as we get more guys back from the IL. I heard Akeem Olajuwon threw out the first pitch in Sugarland. Maybe they're going to secretly try him out on the mound. The dream, unbeatable, that would be great to have him. But we've got Caleb Ort he's made a rehab start. We'll have another rehab start from Lance McCullers Jr. We had one tonight, I believe. Forrest Whitley was scheduled to throw tonight. He's been touching 97 to 98 on the gun, so that's a good thing for him. In his thing, the reason why he was on the IL was some bruise on his knee or his leg, so it wasn't arm related. So that's promising for him. But Spencer Arrighetti got beamed in the throwing thumb. And of course, my initial reaction was, where in the hell was the guy protecting the pitchers in the outfield when they're throwing, right? Like,
they're supposed to be protecting each other, but
right, exactly. What is going on?
Then the odds of him just getting hit in his right hand on his thumb. Now, we did get some good news recently that he does not require surgery. Right. So now it just gets to heal. How long is it going to take? Well, we don't know how severe the break is. But no surgery is obviously a big plus. So, you're probably looking, 3 to 6 weeks somewhere in there. I don't know if he can continue to throw, because if he can throw a little bit with the bum thumb, that will just take time off of what happens later. Because you got to remember, his thumb has to get better. And then he has to be, depending on how much time is off, he's got to get his arm and body back in shape to pitch in a big league game. And, so obviously a situation like that, shorter the better. If it's just a few weeks, then maybe he can get back in pretty soon. But if it goes, 4 to 6 weeks, that's good. That means he's going to have to take a little bit of time to get back in shape once he is healthy with the thumb.
Yeah, exactly. And he's a guy that I think is still, once he comes back, is going to have a big year. Mm-hmm. Now, could that broken thumb, could that mess with the way he throws the ball the rest of the year?
I don't think so. To tell you the truth, I think a thumb is better than the index finger or the middle finger, because those are the two primary power fingers. Okay. They're also your two primary control fingers. Your thumb is kind of just holding the ball in your hand. And then actually by the time you release the ball, your thumb is off the ball. So,
Okay.
it's not a situation that, if it was one of these two fingers, that would be a much different issue. Now, the thumb is still important because it is still holding the ball, but
like you
it's,
can't.
but if you had to pick one of the three, the thumb would be the one. And it's like I said, it's good that he doesn't have to have surgery. There's, it's just a break. It's nothing crazy. He doesn't have to put, any pins or anything crazy like that in. So now it's just a matter of healing.
Exactly. When we, sometimes we like to talk about what's going on around the league, who's hot, who's not. Kyle Schwarber's 10 home runs away from hitting his 300th home run. And Mike, he's having a great regular season. He already has 6 home runs. He's hitting 295, 1188 OPS. This guy's 32 years old, and he bats left, he throws right, but this guy is just your consummate professional. He's a career 230 hitter.
Yeah.
But
and I think that's what's surprising. And the old saying that, water finds its level,
right.
He's, and you got to remember, major league average is about 240 or somewhere in the 240. So, back in the day when it was 260, 270, we're a long way from there. So, him hitting 290, that's probably going to come back down. One thing he always has done is hit home runs. So that's not surprising that he's driving the ball out of the ball. I mean, 6 home runs in the handful of games that have been played. Yeah, that's a big number. But I think the quality of at bat and the higher batting average, I think, is a little surprising, and that's probably going to come back down.
Well, and then you've got also on the Phillies, you've got Bryce Harper chasing 350 career home runs at the age of 32. I mean, the Phillies just got this lineup, Mike, that you look at and you're like, I do not want to face these guys. They are so good. I mean, they're 8-3 right now. They're first in the East. The Braves are 2-9. But get this. The Los Angeles Dodgers they only have 4 losses on the season, but they're in 3rd place.
Crazy. and I think that's a little surprising because how well the Padres have played and definitely how well the Giants have played. The Astros saw the Giants just last week or whatever it was. And, that's a good part of what, they've been able to do. The Padres still have a good team. They still have some pitching. That's I think the surprise are the Gigantors or San Francisco. They're probably not going to stay there. But hey, when you're in first place, you enjoy it as much as you can because at some point the Dodgers are gonna, I don't want to say get it right because like you said, they only got 4 losses. But I mean, you want to talk about maybe the biggest shocker ever if it's the Dodgers don't win that division.
Yeah, exactly. Tiki 52 says right here, Chris, he says the Giants already have 3 walk-off wins in the span of a week. So
you see that's an awesome stat, except that also means they were losing. So
true.
In order to have a walk-off, that means you were playing from behind. So
that's true.
Those are a lot of times those are the things that you can't maintain. One of the stats that I really don't like is 1-run losses because it doesn't really tell you anything. We were just good enough to lose by 1 run. Now, how many times did you blow the lead? That kind of stuff. Now that to me, that has more weight, but 3 walk-offs, I mean, it's cool. It's a great stat, but that also means that you were losing.
Okay, so I have a question. So I was watching the Red Sox. One of the Red Sox hit a home run, and they came in. Actually, it was Bregman hit a home run. It was his first home run at Fenway. And the Red Sox. So the Astros have never really done like gimmicky celebrations. Now, I'm not saying the Astros have to be like everybody else, but I sure love seeing Alex Bregman walk into that dugout at Fenway Park and put on the Wally. It looked like a helmet that was like a miniature version of their mascot. And he went to the dugout, right? Or you got Seattle's got the trident. I'm like, look, if Seattle, one of the worst offenses in the league, has a trident, can we get the Space Cowboys had a space helmet 2 years ago.
Right.
I mean, can we get something that's usually player initiated.
Well, it all have to go through Altuve. Altuve is the leader of the team. He's the face of the franchise. He's the best player in Astros history. So that's who it would have to go through. But I just don't know what would it be. What would it be? I don't know.
It could be a conductor's hat, but that's kind of boring. It could be train themed. You could see. I don't know. I mean, you don't want to do it.
And here's the thing. Here's the thing. You had back in the day when Kevin Millar was with the Red Sox, that was you remember the Cowboy Up, and you go,
yes,
you're in freaking Boston and you're talking about Cowboy Up. Well, that's because Millar's from Austin and here in Texas and went to Lamar and he's a showboat anyway. So that's where it all comes from. So I don't know what it would be, but it would have to come from the players and it wouldn't, it doesn't necessarily have to have anything to do with the Astros.
True.
Heck, we saw teams having like sport coats with,
that was
Toronto had the sports coats and had all the teams on the, so somebody's got to come up with something, or you can just act like you've done it before. How about
exactly.
that?
Oh, well, see, here you go. Here you go. Susan goes, I don't like the flashy dugout celebrations.
There you go.
She goes, but if it boosted their mojo, I'd tolerate it. Hey,
there you go.
So, and then someone said, hey, y'all notice Altuve does a little trot when he's rounding third on a home run. He might do a little bit of one. But I mean, the step back three thing, I think that's more of a Fernando Tatis, Jazz Chisholm does it, and also Randy Arozarena does it. I'm not for. I mean, when you get to the dugout,
it's got to. But and listen, if you're gonna do any celebration, it needs to be unique and one-off. You can't be copycatting somebody else,
right? Exactly. I mean, you can't be like the other people. Like you can't get an Orbit helmet now and use that. But I kind of like someone suggested a space helmet with a sombrero glued to it. That might be kind of nice. But I don't know. I'm sitting here looking around. Maybe, well, you couldn't put on a ghillie suit like you're hunting. That would be fun though. Wearing a ghillie suit through the dugout. But so Mike, I put on here home sweet home with a question mark. It just seems like what is it? Like, I actually joked. I tweeted out and I said, because Fact Sports, who's a parody site, I've met the creator. He's a genius. He said he put out a tweet and he said Dyken Park has been DFA'd, right? And then I said, in a move since Dyken Park's been DFA'd, the Astros have called up Whataburger Field. They've moved it to Houston on April 9th. That way they can have the train there by April 11th when the game starts. I mean, I don't know what we got to do. I hear torpedo bats are supposed to be here tomorrow.
Sure.
I mean, and hey, it's big and bright Friday night, the fireworks. Why not kick the homestand off with the win and a bunch of home runs? Look, Mike Trout's going to be in town. Show him how to hit a home run.
Well, and listen, the Angels are legit right now, and they are hitting the ball.
Hitting well.
So that's, I've always said that it doesn't matter how good or how bad a team is. At some point, everybody's going to get hot. And it seems like right now the Angels have, come out of the box hot, out of the gates hot. And so you got to make sure that you're playing good baseball against them. And it just seems like right now, every time that there's a mistake left out over the plate, they're hitting the ball hard. So you're going to have to really concentrate on location when you're pitching against them. But here's the thing, the Astros, except for 1 year, really in this long run that they've had, they've always been a better road team.
They have been.
You go all the way back to 2017. That's when the real struggles at, then Minute Maid Park, now Dyken Park, that's when they renovated center field. And you remember back then, Springer had a couple, they had to readjust the lights. He got lost in the lights twice early in that season.
I remember that. Yeah.
But this has not been a good offensive team, except for 1 year. I can't remember which year it was. It might be 22. That they were actually noticeably better offensively on the road than at home.
Well, I never bought into the batters eye. I'm like, well, then how
it's
does
something. It's something.
Well, I know, but how do all the other teams come in, and how are they not affected by it? Do the Astros have different eyes? Like,
Well,
it's
it's a great question, and it may not be. I mean, it's well, to tell you the truth, even if I had the answers, it's not one thing. It's a combination of a lot of things.
I think it's mental. I think
that's part of it. That is part of it.
What is Yogi Berra's saying? Baseball is what is it? 80?
No, 90. It was
gosh,
90% is half mental or half something like that.
Yeah. Mental quote. Okay, yeah. Baseball is 90% mental, the other half is physical.
There you go.
You give 100% in the first half of the game, but if that isn't enough in the second half, you give what's left. Gosh, I love Yogi Berra.
And hey, I had the honor of
of
knowing Yogi and talking to Yogi, and that's really him. He didn't just make those things up. That's one of the other ones he had. There's too many people there. Nobody goes there anymore. He's talking about a restaurant. And that was just how he talked. That was his personality. So those aren't just things that he just made up.
That's great. He actually, the guy who did my dad's taxes for a while also did Yogi Berra's taxes. And I actually have a ball somewhere in my collection that says to Brett, best wishes, Yogi Berra. I never got to meet him, but I do have an autograph ball from him. He was definitely a character. Definitely one of one for sure.
I remember when him and George Steinbrenner finally got back on good terms, because he was exiled from Yankee Stadium for a long time.
Really?
And his first time back in Yankee Stadium, he caught the first pitch. Well, the first pitch was thrown by Whitey Ford. And so you're talking about two of the biggest icon players in Yankee history, in baseball history. And the thing that struck me is when they're walking off the field arm in arm, these were two of the smallest little old men, the cutest guy. I mean, it was awesome to think and go, dude, these are two of the best baseball players to ever play this sport. And,
it's humbling.
Because Yogi was never big, and I don't think Whitey was either.
No.
But it was just that's just one of the things that struck me was that, these two little old men, walking arm in arm are two of the best to ever live.
I've got a picture. I've got an autograph 8x10 by Whitey Ford up above my left shoulder, and I've got Duke Snyder right next to it.
Okay.
I actually met them at card shows growing up. My dad took me, and I remember my dad, and I'll share this before we go. I remember the first time we got Mickey Mantle's autograph. And I think it was like $15. It was cheap.
Oh, that was it. Oh
then.
Gosh. Yeah.
And first TriStar show he signed at, and he was not having fun signing autographs. But then when my dad walked up, my dad said, Mickey, I just want you to know you're my idol growing up. I never got to see you play in person because I grew up in Florida and Pennsylvania.
Right.
But I got to watch as many games and listen to as many games as I could. But it's an honor to finally meet you. And he said, thank you for sharing that with me. He said, and and he told him about a home run he remembered seeing. He told him a story. And Mickey just looked at him and shook his hand. And I just love seeing that moment. My dad having that moment with his hero, this childhood hero growing up.
Yeah, that's cool. I remember the first time mine was Nolan.
Wow.
And I was at Alvin Community College.
Okay.
And he was a supporter of our baseball program.
He was
Gary Bullion. Gary Bullion was the head coach at Alvin at the time.
Okay.
And he invited me to go over to Nolan's house in Alvin to pick up something he was doing for us. And so that was to walk in Nolan Ryan's house. And hey, listen, it there wasn't a big mansion, or it was just exactly what you would expect it to be. It was just a nice house. It was a nice house, but it was an older house, and it's where him and Ruth lived for decades and decades and decades.
Yes. They lived there. They had like a couple of of tennis courts back there because
Yep.
his wife was a doubles
Oh,
champion.
she was, he always said she was the athlete.
Yeah. We'll get this. The doctor that delivered my daughter, my 23-year-old, was the doubles partner of Ruth Ryan at Alvin High School.
There you go.
So I've got all these ties. It's funny. My first game where I interviewed professional players, Josh Rojas, Brandon Belak, and Colin McKee, who's no longer with the Astros. I met Jackson Ryan. Jackson is Nolan's grandson.
Right.
And so I got to tell Jackson some of the stories of where I was a youth pastor at in Alvin, and we talked, and we all he's like, oh yeah, my grandfather's talked about that. And one of the coolest things when we asked him, when the Facing Nolan movie came out, we were asking him, like, what was the coolest like moment in his career? He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, what did he ever talk about the most? He goes, he never told one story about baseball. He always talked about us. He always wanted to know what the grandkids were doing. He said, I never have heard my grandfather tell me one baseball
ranch
story.
And his cattle. And
he cares more about that. And I was like, wow, that's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge. I've also had to, I don't know. Have you ever met Reed Ryan? Reed Ryan's amazing.
Oh, I know Reed. I got his phone number right here. I've talked to Reed.
Awesome.
I consider Reed a friend of mine. We've had lunch several times. Reed is salt of the earth. Well, the whole Ryan family is.
They are great. They are great people. So, well, hey, Mike, this has been a great session. This has been a great back to the bullpen session. We're hoping that the Houston Astros come home and forget that they're home and just crush the ball like they're at Fenway Park, because they get really good at Fenway Park.
That's right.
So, Mike, got any parting words?
Sample size is small. We just got to, be patient with and see what this team is going to look like here in another month or two. Just tread water right now. Don't bury yourself in April like you did last year, because last year was an aberration. You're not going to do that again.
That's right. Y'all have a good one. Thank y'all for hanging out with us, and we'll be back soon here in a few days where we'll bring it back to the bullpen. Y'all have a good one.
Adios.
I'm looking to the bullpen to bring my lefty in. Keep the lead and make your team look pedestrian. It's in your wheelhouse, we'll swing for the fence. You know it's money around here, man, I ain't talking expense. Strike one, heat low in the way, you can't hit it. You know you want to start a rally, but you better forget it. Strike two, off speed, same spot, your car looking. Get ready at the plate, this time you're not cooking. Strike three, swinging out of the zone. You ain't even touch it first. Tell me how they gonna drive you home. Walking back,